All right, I think that we're good to go, Tabea? Yeah, that's great. Welcome everyone to our panel. You do not know it yet, but this is like the best panel you've seen. You're going to see at CPDP. I'm Eduard Fosch-Villaronga, and I am currently associate professor at Leiden University at the Center of Law and Digital Technologies. And I'm really happy to moderate our panel called From Science Fiction to Reality, the Ethics of Body Technology Interactions. But first of all, like I just like wanted to thank, if I have like some of the slides. Oh, there's John, perfect. I just like wanted like to, before like introducing the panelists, I wanted like to thank the founder of the panel. Like we are here thanks to Code, and at some point like we will have the slides on here. But Code is actually a really cool international project that like brings together artists and non-artists, politicians, policymakers, and they work together on different activities for like a concrete period of time, like of 6 months. And it's like a cooperation of different organizations in Germany, Transmediale, but the Netherlands also with IMPAKT, and also Belgium with Privacy Salon, and also Werktank. And the good thing about Code is that they bring all of these people together to tackle different like important issues, like how do we make sure that policymakers are aware of what it is at stake, like in technology development. How can we regulate technology companies, and how we can look at art and different art forms to bring forward some of these concerns that we have. So like we're like very excited like to be here for, with them, and they have like open calls every year like to do this 6-month project. So if any one of you is interested, I think that it will be open for 2024 now. But going back to the topic of the project today, there are like different advancements in digital technologies concerning virtual reality, augmented reality, and brain-computer interfaces that are like incredibly shaping the way we interact with each other. And as you can see here, like we brought our students like time ago like to a VR center, and as you see, I am like looking over a window and I just like I'm falling down, and I'm just like actually very much impacted by that event. The video is just like a very short example of how some of this technology is coupling with our daily lives, sometimes like for leisure applications. But there are like many different research groups that they are like trying to work on what they call it mediated embodiment. So like how we can, with the use of this technology, sort of embody, in this case, like highly hyper-realistic robotics. And the idea behind these projects is that there is this sort of the extension of the self to this technology. So like whenever like we are part of that technology, it's no longer that the technology is disconnected from us, but that it's actually like part of who we are. And some of these findings like could actually support claims of, for instance, virtual rape and other kinds of experiments that are actually very much important on that. But what happens with all of these technologies is that they generate a lot of different data, and they are also being applied to different contexts of applications that range from leisure to healthcare to other contexts. So that is why we brought like an incredible amount of researchers that actually have been working on some of these projects. So I want like to first welcome them all, like before like we dig into some of these issues. And I want to introduce first of all Ahnjili ZhuParris, that is a data scientist and also about to graduate from PhD like at Leiden University, but also an artist, and she has been working a lot also on different projects, including science communication. So I wanted to ask you, what is it that brought you here today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm primarily here because I'm also working on a code project. So my team is focusing on voices, and we're going to create a confessional booth in which you, as an audience member, can share one of your secrets. But in exchange, we're also going to clone your voice so you can also tell someone else's secret. And so our project really focuses on the idea of voice ownership and also voice cloning, because it's extremely sensitive data that can be used for the identification of individuals, but it can also be used for the manipulation of your own voice and identity.
Yeah, super.
Lovely. Yes. And so I'm going to talk about my PhD in a bit, but before I get into that, I also create surveillance projects. And I really like to repurpose surveillance to explore how surveillance should be used, and when is surveillance actually appropriate for its own application. So one of my projects is called Future Wake, and in this case, I use predictive policing algorithms. Wait, just to step back, in case you're not familiar with predictive policing, that's when law enforcement uses statistics, but usually they call it AI, to predict where, when, and who will commit a crime. So in my case, I use the same predictive policing algorithms to predict when a police officer in the US would next kill someone. And and these victims, well, future victims that you see on the screen, are AI-generated victims who are telling their stories about how they'll be killed in the future.
Wow, like this is really impressive. Like, and actually, I love like already like how much like the some of this work like can help like go into the counter narratives like on like how law enforcement has been using some of these algorithms. So next to Ahnjili, we have with us Hans Graux, which is a lawyer and a founding partner at Timelex, which is a law specialized on ICT and digital innovation, and he has been usually like advising, I think, like a really wide range of different stakeholders, like on the topics of intellectual property rights and data protection and other fundamental rights. And Hans, do you want to share why you are with us today?
Yeah, I think I'm here to save humanity, basically. Maybe not now in the next panel, and also not afterwards, because then it's the weekend, and it seems like a lot of work to do for an extended weekend also. But there is a serious point to be made about saving humanity, because for me, a lot of this is about that. Like, just fundamentally, so I'm a data protection lawyer and I work on intellectual property rights. So I am a legal person, I do legal advice and ethical advice, but I think there's a bigger and more interesting point to be made than, you know, law is difficult and all that, it is. But there's a bigger point to be made, which is that, you know, fundamentally the way you act and the way you behave, you're always influenced by your environment, by your society. It has always been that way, you know, no person is an island. And increasingly, over the last couple of decades, we've gotten used to technology steering us and nudging us in a certain direction. And used to be, you know, before computers and digital technology came around, it was less pervasive. You were being nudged by your environment, by your parents, your friends, your peers, also, you know, by your politicians, society around you, by legislation. But there was fundamentally humanity around it, so it's pretty easy to spot in which direction you would get to be pushed. And what's interesting to me and fascinating and also deeply frightening about all of these things that you're mentioning, incidentally, what's interesting to me is how gradually as a society we're making that bridge between being nudged by people to being nudged by technology. I think most of us, I mean, arguably got our first taste of that as soon as computers came along and video games already nudged you in certain directions that were being rewarded and not. Social media, which, you know, if you make certain comments or like certain posts, you get more of that, so you get confirmation of the positions that you take. And we see more and more examples of that, of technologies that can limit our behavior or steer our behavior or nudge our behavior. And nudging is the scariest thing of all, because that's the part where you no longer even realize that you're being influenced and pushed in a certain direction. And you're encouraged to go to one side and not to another one. And it's often very innocent and handy. Like if you're sending emails right now, your email client makes recommendations about the responses that you want to give. You receive an email, somebody asks, hey, you want to meet up? And your email client says, do you want to respond? Yes, please. So you're being nudged in that direction. Like, are you available? Are you interested? Is this a good idea? You're being nudged by technology to go in a certain direction. Of course, you have the freedom to say no, but it's important to be aware that you're being nudged. And we see the same thing more pervasively with things like ChatGPT. You're having a dialogue, and it really feels like you're talking to a person, and it really feels convincing. But the thing is that it's just a simulation, a simulated reality behind that is collecting your data and using that to create an image that you emotionally respond to as if it was a human, as if it was a person. And to me, the impact that has on your ability to govern yourself, your capacity for self-determination, to make your own choices, to me, that's sort of the most interesting evolution that we're seeing today. And I have no idea where it's going to go. Obviously, professionally, I look a lot at things like, okay, what about the data protection angle? What personal data is being collected, and proportionality and purpose limitation and all that? But there is a way bigger picture behind that, which is that whole question: where do we want to go?
But like, thank you, like, because like sometimes I don't think like humanity knows that they need to be saved in a way, or like we have to be saved. But it promises like to be a really interesting conversation. We also have like online John Mulgrew. That John is VP of Intellectual Property at Lenovo, and actually has a really interesting background because he's a mechanical engineering, and he although then he started like working like as a lawyer like in New York and also in DC, and he has been leading different teams working also on intellectual property, product and marketing, and also privacy. So hi John, I don't know if you can hear us.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So what brought you today with us, John?
I wasn't sure I was going to have much to contribute to this conversation, and then I started looking at the art and listening and looking at the profiles of everyone. I think this is fascinating. I think what I would bring to what makes me fit into this conversation is that I have been an engineer and working in technology as a patent attorney for almost 30 years now. And I do agree with the concept of nudges. We're getting these technological nudges that propel us further along in terms of what we rely on, what we count on as far as technology being there. So, but I'm an optimist. I actually think that the technological advances that we're seeing can be used for good and make our lives better. We have to be careful about how technology gets used. But I'd rather see a world where technology advancements are happening than try to lock it down. So, and I'm fascinated by the idea of predicting. Sort of, this is like a pre-crime prediction on police, but at the same time, like, well, that's an interesting idea. So, I mean, I do think that what's really fascinating about this panel is that there's this blurry line between art and the everyday. And you know, what's interesting about this group is that I think we're talking about things that could be, and I can imagine they are. I can imagine that they really would happen. And you know, so I think this would be a super interesting conversation.
Yeah,
so nice
thank you, John, like for joining with us also online. And then we have the last but not least, presenter, like that it's Sander Veenhof. I don't think if you noticed something strange in him yet, but he actually combines like a really nice background like between computer science and also with a degree on stable media. So I cannot wait for you to tell us what are you doing here.
Yeah, maybe I can show my
Sure.
slide. The thing I'm wearing, it's a pair of augmented reality glasses.
I think that, yeah, yeah.
Can we go back later on?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I do is I just use them. So I'm not waiting for them to be ready. This one is, it's a sort of a developer's edition. And I make things. So for example, this is an experiment I did to find out if it's possible to sort of color your hand if you're approaching the right button. So I hope it's not patented yet. And I'm in a bit of a hurry because there's going to be a lot of patent filings for these glasses. And actually, if you imagine that our future life is going to be like this, then it means that our whole future life is already patented. That worries me a little bit. I use them in public space quite a lot. That's what I like. Here, it's me controlling a tiny airplane with just very subtle head gestures, just like this. So it means you can actually use it wherever you go. And another thing. We're here talking about the body and the sort of data that the body contributes. This is a way to make really, in a fast way, a graffiti piece by just holding your hand in a certain way. And it's these type of things that bring me here, because I do see a bit of a problem. We are always happy when there's a new patent announced, and we think, oh yeah, that's going to give us superpowers. Some is very useful, like being guided towards, building your own little, IKEA kastje. Or when you have to chop a cucumber, it looks a bit ridiculous, but there's even a patent on recognizing a bored audience when you have your AR glasses on. So that worried me, and because I'm an artist, I think of ways to express my worries and to bring this discussion in a sort of insightful, full way to an audience. And actually that brought me here in this panel now. Because I really think there's going to be a digital divide. If you're having this pair of glasses, and if it's from a company that owns a lot of these patents, you can do a lot. If not, then you cannot do a lot. So the project I created it's called Patent Alerts, and it just alerts you when you're about to do something that cannot be supported by your pair of glasses. And it's a bit of a peek into the future, but you can already imagine, you can feel what it's like if you cannot point at buildings because your device cannot support you to tell you what's going on there. And that's why I'm here.
Yeah, that's great. Do we see the video now or for later? We will go.
Maybe
later.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay. No, just like to then like introduce the panel. Then like you see like the panelists that they have been introducing themselves and like why they are here. But like what we see like with different of these technologies is that they have different embodiments. They are being inserted in different contexts. And there are like different battles going on. Like there's like going to be part of like the panel that we're going to talk about patents and like how is that being articulated both in the world of the law but also in the world of art. But also one of the questions that we want to explore is how our bodies, the more and more are being commodified because of all of these technologies that we are like using, and then how that impacts our physical integrity, privacy, safety, and dignity. So like to start like off the conversation on that and following on what Sander was saying, I'd like to give the floor to you, like to explain a little bit like what is it that you've been working on, so that then like we can start like with the questions.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so currently my PhD focuses on digital phenotyping. So I basically mine people's smartphone, smartwatch, and any other wearable devices that they have for their data, and I try to predict their mental or physical health status. So I guess my elevator pitch for my project is, does your smartphone know if you're depressed? And the answer is yes, it does. And actually, I don't need that much data to actually quantify or categorize you as depressed. Just by looking at your, let's say, location behavior. I don't need to know your exact GPS coordinates, but just by looking at your mobility patterns from a day-to-day basis, I can roughly estimate how depressed you are, because the more depressed you are, the more you tend to stay at home, and the fewer unique locations you tend to go to every day. So I don't need to have like, a million data points for me to understand you as a person. And because of my research, I've become very concerned or worry about how this data could potentially be used. And wait, I just wanted to add one note. Yes. So given that we're at CPDP, I definitely want to acknowledge Zuboff's Surveillance Capitalism book. And I do want to remind the audience that that this type of data mining or data analyses of our mental and physical health will shape our world irreversibly, which would make it harder to have any sense of self that isn't open to being harvested for value. In a world where devices with an internet connection are always collecting information about our behavior, we will have to give up privacy and even the idea of free will. As ZhuParris defines it, surveillance capitalism takes every aspect of the human experience, gathering information from every device that we own, and turns it into a way to predict and shape our future actions for companies to make a profit. Yes. And I'm just going to leave with one more example, and then I'll pass it off to my other panelists. So I think the audience should be aware that this type of data mining doesn't always have to be explicit. It could also be implicit. So for example, let's say when you're bipolar, you can become manic, and when you're manic, you're impulsive, and when you're impulsive, you tend to spend your money in more reckless ways. And being manic online is very easy to track. So you tend to click around more erratically, or scroll rapidly, or open up a million tabs. And if an advertiser or any website recognizes this behavior, they can send you, specific ads like, why not buy this one-way ticket to Las Vegas? Or do you want to, buy a Ferrari today? But I mean, nobody on that website or no data scientist is saying, yes, let's specifically identify manic behavior. They might just say, oh, somebody's clicking more rapidly, then let's give them these ads. So.
I think that like the majority of like or academics or also students maybe labeled as maniacs, like because like, we have like 20,000 like tabs like all the time like together and open, and so like I think that like very much like raises the point on like until what extent like this data is accurate, and then how that accuracy like is actually revealing like some of these traits, and then until what extent you can then sort of actuate to change that, no? Like I remember like being in an installation at Tilburg University with a mirror, and then like you enter to the art installation, and then there's like the different tracking points, and then it tells you, oh, you are 190, and then like you are like 85 kilos, and then like you are like a male, and so, and then some of that information like may not be accurate, but then if there are like decisions being made out of that data, then it's very difficult to really trace back like onto what is that?
Yeah, and I completely agree with this point. And if your category or your analysis is inaccurate, that can also have like huge implications for how you're treated. So, for example, there's another artist called Tomoro Kihara who developed this game where an AI would recognize you as human or not, and the goal is to run across the gym without being recognized as a human. And this father took his son onto his shoulders, and the AI couldn't recognize him, and so they won the game. But if you're crossing a street and a self-driving car doesn't recognize you as humans, that could also potentially be quite dangerous.
Yeah, that is usually the case, no? That then like you put the technology in another context, and then something that seemed safe, then like it becomes like actually unsafe, no? And I don't think that there's that much research on the link between data processing and biases and safety. So that's a great example on that. I just like want to give back like the floor like to Sander, because I think that you had like a video that like maybe like we could play now, and you explain us
Which
a little
sound?
bit.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think that it has like a little bit of sound. So we need a little bit of explanation. Sander, tell us.
Well, to connect to the story we just had about the fact that, for example, ChatGPT presents you with almost like a human-like dialogue, but still you can sort of close your laptop, or you can put your laptop in incognito mode. But I think we're now seeing that these technologies are really going to be part of our daily lives. Our bodies are being tracked. if you're wearing these AR glasses, everything you see all the time, it's not recorded as a video, but it's recorded as knowledge. Like it probably, if I would ask a device later, like how many people were here, I could get an answer. So you're getting this in this situation where there's no way out. So this is going to be our reality, our semi-digital reality, which means that everything becomes software, and then, yeah. So that's why I'm creating these projects to think, hey, what does that actually mean? And
yeah, and I think that what I like is that it very much blurs the line between what's reality and what is not. No, that just before like entering here, like Sander was like showing me like a couple of games that you can use your glasses on, in which like it seems that everyone like is hunting you, and then like with the glasses like you can just shoot at them, but nobody knows that what you're doing. Like it's just like you're playing. So like everyone like around you just becomes a sort of like target and like part of like your hybrid virtual physical reality.
yeah, they become NPCs, the non-playable characters in your scene. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that is really good. So thank you, like both, like for like kicking this sort of grounded discussion. Like there's a lot of different technologies that look very differently. We have like different questions like in this panel, like concerning this, and I would like to maybe give the floor to Hans and then like to John, like on to what extent then like do you think that we can ensure that these technologies that they are just popping out and that their like technology readiness might not be at the most desired level, and so like can ensure not only privacy but I would say autonomy, I would say like other rights. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think right now we don't really have good legislation to deal with this type of applications yet. But I think a lot of these applications start off with good ideas or useful ideas, or at least with the best of intentions. Like everything always starts with the best of intentions. But I think we're at a point where you fundamentally need to have more reflection about why are you doing this? Why are you building these applications? And what is the good thing or the valuable thing that you expect to happen? I was on board with shooting people with the smart glasses. That sounds like fun, but there are some applications that are downright more scary. And if your glasses are going to be making recommendations about where you should go and who you should talk to and what you can look at and what you should not be looking at, that's pretty scary. And I think our legislation, like the newly proposed legislation, like the AI Act, to me kind of goes into the right direction, in the sense that it requires you, if you want to put a product like that on the market, to assess what the risk level is. Is it high risk? Is it low risk? And to force you, as someone who puts this kind of product on the market, to justify that. And I don't think there's any, you can't oblige people to get it right. You can't oblige people to say, look, you have to be able to assess perfectly what a technology is going to be used for in the future and what the implications are. But you can force people to say, look, you have to think about this. You have to justify it. You have to look at what the potential risks are and impacts are on your customers, but also on society as a whole. Because it doesn't matter if your customer is happy, but there's a negative impact on the rest of society. And then still justify why you think that this was a good idea and force some transparency on that topic. I think that's part of the answer. And it's also a precondition for getting to a good point, because right now, like for me, one of the big challenges is just the lack of awareness and the lack of literacy, lack of understanding that you have as a general member of the audience about what exactly is going on behind the screens. Like I understand at a high level what kind of data my phone contains, for instance, but I would not have thought that somebody might want to look at my data location, data from my phone and say, oh, this person might be depressed. I'm not, I'm just working from home, by the way. That's not, which is sometimes depressing, but they're not 100% correlated. But I did not think about that, and I do think it's important, that for me to know that if I start getting advertisements for antidepressants, then I would be interesting for me at least to know, sorry, but how did we get there? If inferences like that had to be made, I think there should be an obligation to provide some more transparency on that point, and I should have the option to get out of that arrangement. And then, I don't want that. That's
Hans, can I ask you? Do you say that as as an individual or with your background? Because are you actually saying that we all should inform ourselves all the time about everything going on? I mean, that's
No,
too much. It's
but I
getting
think I do
crazy.
think that there needs to be an active obligation in these kinds of products and services to inform people about what's going on. Like the simplest example of that is, for instance, when you're talking to a chatbot, there should be clear notification to say, hey, this is a chatbot. Don't think for a second that this is a human being, because that's dangerous. You conflate things. You start talking to a chat. Chatbots are so realistic, they sound exactly like human beings, and it's only going to get better. And in a couple of years, we'll have realistic images and faces. And if you want, indeed, you can clone somebody's voice. I'll have a chatbot that looks exactly like me, talking back to me with my voice. I might be talking to virtual images of my children in a couple of years and not be able to distinguish them from the real deal.
But
That's
Hans,
dangerous.
if the explanation is about 3 A4 pages long and you just click OK, then you have sort of been presented with the explanation, but you're not reading it. So
No,
is
but
this the way we should do it again? Like
no,
the
it's
cookie?
not the only thing, but you can have the simple thing like a logo to say, okay, look, this is an AI-driven reality, and you can click through if you want to know more, which virtually nobody will want to do. But it's important to know, look, the reality that you think you're seeing, that's not actually reality. It's being manipulated, and you can click here to find out more. And if a very important and actually much more important part than the legislation behind that, you start educating people, which we really urgently need to start doing from a very young age, about what is happening, that's going to be critical. I mean, one of the concerns that I have, and I'll wrap up there, if you look at how convincing this is and how an AI application can learn exactly about your preferences and your interests and what you like to hear and what you don't like to hear. I have very young children. I honestly think they might grow up having a chatbot as their best friend. Why wouldn't you? The chatbot is always there when you want them. Yep. They'll tell you exactly what you're interested in, they'll point out to you when there's something interesting. They'll always be nice to you. They'll hate the same people that you hate, and they'll feel exactly like real people. But it's important to tell them, look, it's not real. You're not in an actual interaction. This is just a figment that's spitting back information that it thinks you want to hear. And like I mentioned, we had a prior discussion call, was a case about a couple of months ago about a depressed person talking to a chatbot, and the chatbot did exactly what it needed to do, what it was programmed to do. Person kept saying, like, I'm depressed, I wish I was dead, I don't think there's a point in living. And the chatbot confirmed, yeah, I think maybe you should kill yourself. And he did. And this is kind of also what I'm getting to. The chatbot didn't even malfunction. It wasn't poorly designed. It just wasn't a human being and sounded exactly like it. And it's important to say that what you want to hear is not maybe a good reflection on you. That might not be what you need to hear. And to me, that transparency and that education are actually two very important parts and not even legal ones.
Yeah, well, what you point out is that it can be, like, in many occasions extremely dangerous to actually, like, just let alone, like, the chatbot or the system, and that if there is not appropriate accompanying, with that, like, you've been also, like, on the medical field, and so, like, there are, like, many moments in which, like, the sensitivity of the context, like, might require, like, extra safeguards. Mm-hmm. But then, like, when we look at how the AI Act, like, is working, like, towards the redirection, like, towards of development of standards, and it is well, we all know, I guess, like, in the room, like, the problems of not having, like, enough representation in standardization activities, and also, like, about, like, whether this fundamental problem on, like, do we want then standardization bodies, like, to actually deal with all of these topics, whether that is a desirable route. I want to ask John online, what is, well, perhaps, like, more, like, on the positive note, as you said that you were, like, a bit more optimistic, but also because of your background, I think that's an important point for the panel. Like, what is it that patent laws and intellectual property rights impact the development of these technologies? Is this a route that is actually something that it's down the line protecting the users? Like, is it, like, actually the other way around? Like, could you explain, like, to us, but also to the audience a little bit, like, what is the role of patent law in this?
Yeah. Happy to do that. So I think we probably need to separate patent laws and patent systems from the ethics and morality questions that we're asking about. What is the right use of technology? Patent law around the world is intended to incentivize people to make new things. So if you and I like a world where people want to make new things. I'm not completely sold that the patents is the only way to do that, but it's one way to incentivize people to innovate and make new things. So I think we have to ask ourselves, do we want a world where people try to distinguish between a human being and a non-human being, or a child on your shoulders? And you can imagine, I can imagine scenarios where that technology would save lives. And I can imagine that technology where it could be used for something really horrific. So, but the incentive to create that technology, that we have to ask ourselves, do we want or do we want to propel ourselves forward with technology? And if we do, then a patent system can help create that. So the patent law is not really an ethics-based system at all. It's just trying to create incentive to create more. It's based on it. There is sort of a policy underneath, which is the world is better by innovating, by spurring innovation, but it's not intended to be, I don't think, any kind of moral judgment on people or policies or privacy or how that technology gets used. It's more about allowing the technology to be available to be used. So I personally think that patent law does not address a lot of the concerns that are being discussed here, unless you decide that this threshold question, is the world better with new technology or not? If you answer no, then you would say we should not. I think it would lead you to say we shouldn't have a patent system. We shouldn't incentivize people. And you're certainly entitled to that opinion if you think that's the way the world is, if the world is better that way. But I think every one of these examples where something bad could happen, I can also imagine how something good could happen. And so to me, I think that privacy, underpinnings of privacy law, like, and knowing what and I think Hans already talked about this, knowing what you're dealing with is a certain type of technology rather than a person, seems like a right. Giving someone knowledge about what they're interacting with, giving them the choice to either have it or not have it in their lives, and then giving them that, keeping that in their control rather than having it be someone else's control. Those are fundamental principles of privacy, and I think a lot of what we're talking about now that we're concerned about are probably addressed through regulatory regimes like privacy or other types of systems that should protect the individual's choice over what is known about them.
And John, do you agree that this should be the way it should be in the future? And I'm saying this because when I hear you talking, it seems that there's been like a little bit of the humanization of patent law, in which like we just depart from the premise that innovation is ideal and desirable. We also know that technological fixes for complex societal processes are actually not that much working, I would say, and because we see a lot of sort of conflation, or this idea of bringing privacy by design, for instance, or bringing ethics into the design processes, or this interdisciplinarity in different disciplines, so that we could achieve goals in a more sustainable way, I would say, not only environmentally talking. Do you think that the way patent law is working right now sort of lacks this more of an understanding on what is the impact that then these innovations might have on society? Should we rethink the way this is working, so that then we could bring a little bit the voices of underrepresented groups, or we could have a sort of speculative design methods to anticipate some of these consequences in society in the future? And so
I think I'm going to say no to your. I don't think that's what patent law will do. But my concern is that patent law is broken. So I think the patent systems around the world are not perfect systems. I think Sander's some stuff I've seen already about identifying patents that might prevent you from having an experience that you otherwise might make your life better. Is a legitimate concern. So this digital divide, I think, is the term that he used. I worry more about, okay, patent law. Let me back up. Patent law is a system that lets you stop someone else from using the technology. That's all it is. So if you create something and contribute to society, you have a limited period of time which you can stop everyone else from using it. That's all patent law does. If you have something new, how long should that be? And that's a I think a very legitimate question. If someone has the ability to stop you from having a car that could not hit people, automatically detect people and not hit, wouldn't it be great if that technology were available tomorrow rather than in 20 years, which is the life of most patents around the world?
Yeah.
And it could it be that only people of a certain status and class can buy that technology while other people can't get it for another 20 years? That doesn't seem fair. So I think access to technology is where the policy really breaks down in patent law. Is we have such a long life of the ability to stop other people from using it that it runs the risk of having these outcomes where some people get it and some people don't. That's more of my concern.
Yeah.
As far as like whether the technology is being used for good or for bad, I don't think patent law can address that problem. And I think if you said, for example, we don't like generative AI, we don't like AI because it's scary. Bad things can be done with it, and that's totally true. People can commit suicide. It can get things wrong. All kinds of things can happen. If you don't create the incentive to create that technology, what I wonder about is how the good things that can come out of that, what we lose from making that choice. And this is a story, by the way, that was told, that's already been played out with software, with drugs. So there are different examples throughout history and patent law where countries have said, we don't want patents on a certain technology because it has a societal benefit or has a societal ill. And when you pick on a technology and treat it differently than other technologies, you get very surprising outcomes. Like countries that have said, we're not going to have patents on drugs, suddenly they couldn't get drugs for people because drug manufacturers wouldn't sell there. And conversely, like if you had no patentability on software, for example, you have industries get created in other countries. You lose an ability to create jobs in a market where patentability is lost. But I think it's very difficult to have social policy in IP law. The more you try, the more surprising the result will be, and it probably does more harm than good to the country that does it. That's my personal. It's just a personal opinion. I might be wrong, but that's just kind of how I feel about it.
Well, it's good to hear that it's your personal opinion because you're part of this. I mean, the whole ecosystem. So it's good that it starts somewhere because I really think the world is changing so rapidly that if you talk about, for example, if you develop medicine, yeah, of course you spend years and years of trying and testing, and it takes effort with software and programming and just thinking of something like chopping a cucumber and making that into a game. That's only the thing. It doesn't really matter how you make it. And nowadays, I mean, since a few months, you can ask ChatGPT, can you write a program? And it writes it for you in 10 seconds. So
that's right. That's right.
So it seems that the whole patent system needs to change quite urgently to reflect the situation.
You're right. And actually, if you just tracked, for example, how many patents, if you went back to like 1990 and asked how many patents issued, and you pick any country you want, right? I'll just pick the United States since I'm in the United States. If you just looked at how many patents issued in 1990 versus how many patents issued in 2022, you would see that there's this, actually year over year, it's a progression upward. So we have a very, very high appetite, the world, to file patents on things. I've been working for maybe 30 years in patent law. Very few patents are actually worth a whole lot, and it's not the cucumber chopping patent that's gonna be millions of dollars, right? So why do people do that? Why do they file on these more incremental, small, seemingly non-commercially valuable ideas? And I don't have an answer to that. I've spent the last couple of years of my career trying to stop doing that and just try to be focused on more like what is the goal of innovation for the company that I work for? What are we going to make that's going to make people's lives better, make them like our products better? Let's protect those things. Let's not get too hung up on all the other smaller ideas. But we are in a culture, worldwide culture, where patenting is cool. And I think you've expressed in your art some of the fears that could come from too many patents that might block a seemingly normal experience, like pointing at a building or having a gesture to turn a page. It might be patented by somebody, should you really be not allowed to have a gesture of turning a page, to have a digital experience, like a real world experience? I think and should only people who have money be able to experience that versus people who don't have money? Those are great questions. That's where I think patent law is a bit broken, because patent law is telling, it's a system that says, yes, you can stop people from using this technology if you want to. You decide now, right? So that's a problem with patent law for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it sounds individualistic, for profit. It seems selfish, no? Like it seems like that. It's sort of like somehow sometimes that where society like somehow like is going like in a way like of being like very jealous like about like our own territoire, like being like in a company, but even like in personal relationships. I wanted like to turn to you like Ahnjili, like we're talking about like some of these technologies. We're talking about some of the patent problems. What then, like when these technologies are sort of migrating like from the outside world like to the inside world, like and I don't know like if that is the realm of prostheses or like robotics and so like, but like does it change the focus and the conversation like once like we have these devices inside us?
Yes, I would certainly think so. I want to give one example of a second site. So that was a bionic eye startup that went bankrupt probably around 10 years ago. And so they were helping people who were blind by implanting a artificial eye. But because they went bankrupt, basically these 300, clients or patients, however you choose to see them, could no longer maintain their eyes. And so this has huge implications for autonomy and dignity, because how are you supposed to basically live your life if the person who basically augmented your life can no longer be there to support you? I just wanted to add one other note.
Yeah, another just when you're looking at your note, like it reminds me like of some experiments conducted, I think in Rome, about prosthetic limbs, and there was this case of the patient being part like of this European project in which like then the person like would have like the upper limbs and he very much like gain back like the sense of touch somehow, like because of like the agency that provided. But then like what happened is that once the project was over, then of course he had to hand the device to the researchers, because then the technology was like not there. And in a way like it seems like very critical, no? Like when you are like in a European project, like you are conflicted with wanting to advance research towards a better society, technology that it's working, and then like of course you need to involve subjects into the experiments, but then like they're sort of left out now without this maintenance, or like without like really like because the technology is not there yet, or
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the maintenance is one issue, but also, like, if, there's an issue with the bionic eye, let's say, like, some part is severed, and now it's, like, leading to some kind of bacterial infection, like, who are you supposed to go to seek help from? Because now all the specialists who work with that technology are no longer available. And also, I know we talked about inserting wearables as well, but I was thinking about this earlier, given that we're also interested in VR and AR as well, that there are lots of experiments and even therapies where people are trying to externalize their experience, kind of like a type of cognitive offloading. So one example is, let's say if you have body dysmorphia, you might develop a virtual reality companion that could help you revisualize how you perceive yourself. But if that program is no longer available, you're kind of that your digital twin is no longer available to help you. And so I just wanted to bring that up as, wearables can be internalized, and that can have an impact, but once you start externalizing your experience to other devices as well, that can also have an impact on how you operate on your day-to-day basis.
But then, can I ask you, do you think that we should have as a requirement that whenever you insert something in your body, it should be open source, so that in case this happens, that you could find a hacker that can continue working on it?
Yeah, but I guess that brings up issues of liability, I guess,
Or,
because
or a hacker that could take
Yeah.
over. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the concern is again, it's a double-edged sword. Continued access to the technology can also be used to cause harm to you. So I do worry about. I actually like open source. Nothing wrong with open source, but I think these are all choices where the first choice is, do you want the technology at all? And if the answer is yes, because I can see my life is better, then you should be made aware of what the risks are, and it might be good, for example, to have some removal requirement. Like if something is being put into your body and someone has taken advantage of that and you can't prevent it, then I would like to live in a world where that could be removed, or that security vulnerability could be fixed.
I mean, just to build on that, I mean, I completely agree, but should we also look at removal and replacement? So in the case of, let's say, a pacemaker, yes, you can remove it, but now, yeah, how is this person supposed to function? So should there be also a requirement of, I don't know, finding a substitute for a defunct technology?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that what happens with these hybrid systems, it's basically like that there are like many times in which like there are like irreparable situations, no? Like if we have like, for instance, like a robot that is just like going to like let this down, this is an irreparable situation unless there is like human intervention for it, no? And then like we have like many moments in which then it seems to me that because of what you were referring before, like on Zhupov's work on how we are using human experience to not only harvest data and like be data generators, but somehow it seems like to be like a playground like with this human experience in which like in some cases there seems to be like a very careful, well thought process on how are we going to go about once the project ends or something. But like in other moments we see that there are like experiments like being made, and then as long as like you do not know that because like you are not aware that this is happening, it might not have like certain consequences. But the problem that I see oftentimes is about these diversity and inclusion issues that actually is like, well, you are not represented on that, like your interests are not being valued in a way, and then you're sort of left aside because you represent just like this minority like that have an eye, and it's like, yeah, like I mean, no, like somehow like it seems that in some context like it's in that certain human lives are disposable, or like less they do not deserve is enough attention like as others, which shouldn't be totally the case, no?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you would like to elaborate on your work on exoskeletons in this context.
Yeah, so we have been working with lower limb exoskeletons. So these are technology that it helps wheelchair users stand up and walk. And we were running several experiments with them, and then we started realizing when we were doing those that basically the women that we were working with, they were complaining about the exoskeletons. The exoskeletons were not fitting their bodies. And then when we started like looking at it, we realized that even though there were like objective measurements about the arm wrist and like the height, and so measurements like breast size or like the pelvis like were not being taken into account. But these devices work with a body trunk support, in which then like of course the chest is a very important component. And what we started seeing is that these devices like couldn't like be closed, or like they had a lot of problem with that. And when we looked at the data, we started seeing how women were spending more energy and they were more stressed like performing those devices. So it sort of started like giving this understanding that there are anatomical differences that they are not being taken into account. But then like the sort of like sickness of the whole situation is that then like we would be looking at the standards, so not patterns in this case, but like standards to seek for answers. Like, are there any safeguards that precisely like are looking at these, well, in this case, just gender issues, but like we can very much imagine that like intersectional aspects also play a role in that. And the ISO standard like remains very silent into that respect. So then what would happen somehow is that then there would be robot developers that would have a conformity assessment towards this standard and get the CE market and place their device into the market without having taken into consideration like some of these aspects, which might lead like to certain unfortunate events, no? And this is very much like this idea that it's not only the developer perhaps missing essential aspects and missing some of this consideration, but also to what extent, as Hans was saying before, like how the law is very much law or standards is reflecting some of these. I don't know if you want to pick on that, Hans.
Yeah, but I think also this is an example of where the shift in technology, this is a case where the changes in technology also have a beneficial side effect, because in these kinds of projects, you do indeed get more objective data and more objective measurements on what the experiences are of your user communities. So it's less dependent on just what professionals who design a certain technology or certain technique say. You get more feedback from the user itself. Co-creation is like one of the buzzwords of the last couple of years, but it is a very important one because it fixes a very real problem. And like in the example that you mentioned, it's sort of a misrepresentation or a lack of representation of female feedback, so that the perspective there is entirely wrong. And this is something that has been wrong, at least in Western medicine, for a very, very long time. And these kinds of technologies are one way of helping that. You get more objective data to evaluate whether a solution is working and for who it's working, and you get more opportunities for finding answers. So my contributions to the panel so far have been a pretty doom and gloom, but I also recognize that there are some benefits there as well. But it is a matter of reflecting carefully about what exactly that you want to do, and what context that you are operating in, and indeed whether you are considering all of the different perspectives and all the interests of your stakeholders. And I think that the examples for technologies, AI and robotics in the medical context, I'm actually less worried about that because they work within a very rigidly regulated environment, and there are requirements there to assess, to test whether the technologies and the solution work, whether they are safe. We have regimes for ensuring their accessibility, their affordability for people who need them. Sometimes they give fair outcomes, sometimes unfair ones. And sometimes society will just say, look, this is a very expensive technology and this costs too much for the benefit that you get. But at least there's a regulated and a clear sphere that you're working in. One of the concerns for me is that artificial intelligence, robotics, and these kinds of technologies are more and more used outside of that well-regulated context where you have no such consideration. And I like the notion, I think you mentioned it, of sort of external digital wearables, like for instance, being able to construct a persona that matches your identity. Good luck trying to convince anybody that that's necessary for your well-being. But there's a good case to be made for that. I mean, I don't feel a need for it, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a need for it, and that there aren't people that would objectively benefit for it. And if they've spent a lot of time creating this particular digital persona, and that actively contributes to your well-being, and at some point you're just going to say, look, from now on it's 500 euros a month, or good luck. That's a discussion we also need to have at some point. And that represents a broader shift in society from focusing much more on sort of just the physical well-being, where now we have much more attention for the diversity that you have in society and the importance of mental and emotional well-being.
Well, you are like somehow like left at the mercy of technology readiness, no? Like on how like good is this digital twin going to be about you and so on.
And what do people think is good for you? Like how much influence do you have on that, and how much decisions are being made for you, on behalf of you, without necessarily accepting your opinion on that? Which is why I think the exoskeleton example that you mentioned was interesting, because the feedback was just very simple, saying, okay, look, a serious group of your female users are complaining that it's not particularly usable because their needs haven't been taken into account. That's sort of co-creation that works, I think, and then nobody can reasonably argue with.
We're entering at the last 15 minutes of our panel, and I wanted, before asking the audience if you guys have questions or want to contribute to the discussion, like that's exactly what I wanted, like to just like talk. We have artists, we have like lawyers, we have like patent people, we have scholars. Like, what are we doing together? Like, this is a very informal question. Like, but I want to know a little bit on what is it that is important about art, and what's the role that art has into all of this discussion, and like how we can use art to have like a sort of like to bridge, to provide like meaningful conversations. Like, how are we using art as a platform to provide like some of this data? I'm looking at you, but also like to you, Sander, like to start. Who wants to start? Sure.
I can go ahead.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, art serves as a creative type of science communication. It really makes, I don't know, these hidden or less obvious or less approachable technologies very visible. Just to highlight the work of the artist from earlier, Tomoro Kihara. So he did a project where he used an off-the-shelf violence detection algorithm that would analyze videos or images to see if somebody was engaging in a violent act. And he invited police officers and civilians and other researchers to look at the project. And they found that for the same image, if you simply just change the skin tone of the person, then the violence prediction would go up like by 50-fold or something like that. And so like, no, we don't necessarily need like extensive scientific evidence to convince policymakers or police officers that perhaps this algorithm shouldn't be used at all. Just by having like a very simple and engaging format that would be sufficient to get your message across. And for me, for my own personal work, I really enjoy repurposing these types of technologies to explore when they're actually appropriate. And let's see, I like to find the creepy line or the exaggeration line because it makes it engaging and funny. So the example I also gave earlier was my fashion police drones. So basically, I created a fashion police algorithm that would analyze videos or images of people. So it would range from, you know, like wearing high-heeled Crocs, which I think definitely is a fashion crime, to wearing a hijab, which is an actual, not wearing a hijab is an actual fashion crime in Iran. And also here in Europe, in the Netherlands and in France, you're now allowed to wear a burqa outside. So that's a fashion crime. And so I deployed these algorithms onto a drone. And so for every time you committed a fashion crime, you would then be stalked. And there are people who are dealing with actual drone stalking PTSD because it's extremely loud, and people know the consequences if you end up getting targeted because the U.S. military will then send a missile that somehow has knives that pop out when it intercepts with you. But anyway, so by creating this like funny installation, I can also instill the horrors of being the victim of absurd surveillance technologies as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's a fascinating work you're doing there, like because of course, like these high heel crops are fashion crimes, but beyond like the laughing, like I think that this is exactly what like going like a little bit beyond, like on not only fashion crimes, but then like this sort of new forms of discrimination. We have also, I have a master's student, I don't know if she's here, like Emma, like she's working on beauty technologies, like, and also how you can be discriminated or be because of the beauty standards, like of like whoever like made them, like, and so, and of course like it is a little bit different, like from the crime and so, but like we see like these sort of new categories of like ways in which you can be in a really disadvantaged position, and how that like would actually have a chilling effect on like how do you then present yourself to society or like navigate life. Sander, you wanted to say more like about the role of art?
I think being here, sort of the artist in a domain that's very tech oriented and business oriented, I think there's a lot of freedom you have as an artist. There's of course nobody asking for a patent checking app that tells you what not to do things. I mean, the whole world is happy about a new innovation when it's launched as a patent, like, okay, oh, now we're all going to have these superpowers, but yeah, this is an app that nobody wanted. But still, I make it. And
If I can interrupt, actually, there might be a big market with patent lawyers. They could just walk around the street and say,
Oh,
oh,
that's-
there's
that's a
someone
great
to
idea.
sue. They might actually pay
There's finally a
quite lot of
market
money
for
for
me.
those glasses.
Yeah.
Is that what you do, John? Like,
No, it's not what I do. But I can see that there would be a lot of people who would be interested in talking to you about that technology for that reason. You know, people go to trade shows. I used to do this 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Go to trade shows. I would learn the portfolio of my client, and I would go to trade shows and see if anyone else is copying their innovation, and then I would have to notify them that they're infringing. So that was my job a long time ago. Man, it would have been great if I could have just carried my phone around and did all that. For me.
then I have to disappoint you a little bit, and that's the other role you can play as an artist. Sometimes you can fake things a little bit, you know.
Yeah,
Part of what I
that's
created
okay.
was true. It was actually detecting objects around you, and it was indeed looking in a patent database. But the text there was so horrible long and people are so impatient that you're not going to listen for minutes for an explanation. So I did summaries, and I picked the ones that were really telling. So I must say, I faked it a little bit, and that's the good thing. If you do that as a business, you're gone. And as a scientist, also it's the end. So I think that's the freedom you have as an artist, and also to really go for something that completely fails, which is lovely to just go for it, knowing that it's not going to work at all. But then you're making the point, and you're recording that, and that also tells a nice message. But that's not something you can do as a business, but because it doesn't look good for you.
well, I wouldn't mind like having something that like in a very short and sexy way like tells me that it's not good, or like there's a pattern there, like be careful, like it's like well, yeah, we have like a thing. Sorry, like it's very a bit informal, but I have a thing with a friend. Like we're very foodies, and we like restaurants and so, and recommendations. There's a lot of blogs and so, and we keep saying like we just like need a guide that just like tells you that restaurant like must go, that restaurant don't go, like something like very simple that just like tells you what you need to do. Time for the audience. Like we would like to engage with you. We don't know like if you have questions to the panelists on the different topics that you have heard, if you have points of direction, like feedback, like what is it that you made want to do, or if you have experience with art and how did that go. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to? Yeah, sure. Yeah, this one.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the discussion and for the panel. I think I have essentially 3 points, and I will be brief. The very first one is essentially to challenge what I've seemed to have heard about the assumption about the role of technologies versus basically the assumption that being nudged by technology is something different than being nudged by humans. And I would actually tend to disagree with that. Because if you think about, and I think it's a dangerous actually assumption, because at the end of the day, technology is built by humans, the same way that institutions like the law are built by humans. And so the only difference is essentially whether those technologies are created in a democratic fashion through open source, as we want the law to be created through democratic processes. So this would be my first point.
Yeah.
The second point is essentially regarding, and to thank, I think your name was Sander, for the example that you gave, because it actually made me realize that we may be entering a world where we will be facing the same issue that we now already see happening when it comes to traditional knowledge and patents. I don't know if people in the room know the issue about traditional knowledge. So this is essentially all the knowledges that have been accumulated by traditional populations like medicine, and that some of these insights have been patented by the pharma industry, and essentially those medicines have been sent back to those same people, and now they have to pay for. And I think that there is a similar kind of risk here, that we suddenly have to pay for things that we have been doing. So I would encourage people to look at this. And final point, and this is maybe even a more fundamental critique to the way how we try to address the issue. I have the feeling that we are relatively still superficial when it comes to trying to address the issues. We are talking about how can we address this with the law, how can we address this with politics, And I wonder if at the end of the day, we shouldn't be trying to address this at a more fundamental level, because a lot of the issues we're dealing with seems to be augmenting fundamental flaws that we have in ourselves, in our self-perception, in our tendency to flee reality for whatever reason. So I wonder if you see kind of a way to be more conscious overall, and maybe through that solve the problem that we are trying to solve.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for very much. Like the first point, like I think that it's very important to make. No, I think that there has been a lot of discussion on the role that that autonomy plays in society. Like somehow, in a way, the way we already like phrase the discussion, like it seems that the robot did, the machine decided, the algorithmic decision making, and that has like a lot of confusion consequences because it seems like to remove the human like from the equation, whereas like I think that I agree with you that actually like humans do intervene in various roles, even if depending on like the degrees of activity, and having like a little bit more on clarity on that like would actually like streamline the roles and responsibilities of the different actors, which at the end of the day are humans or companies behind them. So thank you for that. Sander, you want to respond to the second?
Well, actually, the third one, which is interesting that you say. So, like, what is actually happening? But we're here with a very mixed panel. But still, yeah, of course, we're not making changes immediately. So, if you look at all the stakeholders, so you can, as a person, think, hey, the government is going to fix it because the companies will be, doing what the government is supposed to, like they should limit them. But I think as an individual, you're also a very important stakeholder here. But on your own, you can't do a lot. You need to collaborate together. And then I would recommend you to check code. Arjan is there, because code is actually going there, hands-on, all together, trying to fix this just by doing it. So not hoping that somebody will pick up the message, no, making it. And I think that's definitely something. It's going to be a lot of work for all of us. We need to be skilled in all this new technology that's being dumped on us. But if we try to avoid it for too long, it will be too difficult to catch up. So it's best to just go for it, make and try and experiment.
It's both, no? At the individual level, like what is it that our projects like we are working on to strive for a better world, a safe humanity, but also like how we can then join forces in order to tackle like one common goal. I'm going to ask for the last question, Song.
Yeah, hello, my name is Hong Yao. I'm a PhD researcher in VUB, and currently I'm also engaged in a project focusing on extended reality in rehabilitation, in work safety, and also to help the disabled people to communicate in daily life. And I know very few about the mechanism of the technology. It's cool, but as a legal partner, I have a lot of concerns about the data protection and privacy. And besides the apparent privacy and data protection issue of the users, I want to mention another group of people like the bystanders. And as what Sander showed us, when they use the device may collect data concerning the people, like the family members, visitors of the hospital, and also even bystanders at public places. And compared to the users who was provided enough information about the data processing purpose and their rights, those people, it's hard for them to exercise their right to data protection because they are not aware of how they will collect my data, how they will process my data. So my question is, are there already any technical or administrative measures to mitigate such kind of risks? Thank you.
Oh, no.
No, like...
But the issue is that it's very sort of use case specific. An example that I recently encountered, it's comparable to what you're saying, is parking meters and registration for that. So it used to be, and it still exists, if you have a disability, you get a card that you can put under the window of your car, and then if a police officer comes by, they'll see the card and they say, okay, I don't find this person. They didn't pay for a parking space, but they're allowed to be here because of this disability card. The system is entirely changing nowadays. When you park somewhere, more and more spaces, you need to enter the license plate, the number on the license plate of your car, so that the inspections can be done automatically. So there's just an inspection car driving down the street. And it has as a side effect that the disability card for disabled people doesn't work anymore because that cannot be videoed from the street. And the solution that was found for that is that these people with disability have to register the license plate via a specific application, an online application. But that also means that they have to register their whereabouts and their location in an automatic system, and not just that of their own, because people with disabilities are often also occasionally driven around by other people who are acting as their chauffeurs. And those people don't have a disability, did not necessarily agree to it, are not necessarily happy about it. And it's very difficult to find a good situation about it. I could be lazy as a lawyer and say, you know what, just have some legislation to frame and say that this is okay, that this is how the system works. But fundamentally, it also requires a debate about how far do you want to go to manage these kinds of issues. And that was a very specific issue about parking metering, which is very boring and administrative, but very important because it has a very significant impact on people with disabilities, but also on people who want to help people with disabilities. And that's the last thing that you want to do, is to set up rules and mechanisms that essentially penalize you for helping people in that situation.
Can I just quickly say something on this too? I think if you try to regulate this solution, you probably won't get to the best solution, which might be a technical solution. I think a lot of times we jump to regulatory review or regulatory requirements. And there are, I believe that even the example of the handicap parking spot, I don't think that requirement of what happens today is what will happen in 5 years. I think 5 years, if you let technology solve these problems, these huge problems, or even small inconveniences, you will see a different scenario in a few years. I really do believe that. The other thing I would say, I'll give you an example of that.
John, I think that I will have to cut you, because we are running out of time. So I'm so sorry, but this just shows how nice and gezellig this was. So I would like to thank you everyone for attending, for the panelists, but also to say once more that art is important and has a really important role in our lives, but also to push the boundaries of what's known and to really demand for a policy change. So thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you, Eduard.
And thank you, John.
Thank you. Take care.